Hey folks, Jordan with TYT and TYT Politics. Hope you're having a nice Monday morning. I'm here in New York City in my apartment. I wanted to do a quick video on Neil Gorsuch. It's all cable news is talking about right now. There are hearings going on right now for his hearing or his confirmation. There is will the Republicans deploy the nuclear option, which is essentially changing the rules of the Senate to allow to get rid of the filibuster so that they could just unilaterally ram Gorsuch through. And there is the decision among some Democrats whether to vote for him or not. Let me tell you which Democrats are voting for him. You will not be surprised. These are the Democrats that tend to vote with Republicans on just about anything. You have North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who is up for re-election in 2018. You have Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly, also up for re-election, and West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who is up for re-election in 2018. They have all said they are going to vote for Neil Gorsuch to be confirmed. Again, these three we've already discussed in prior videos, need to be primaried. They basically feel very confident in the fact that they are going to win re-election. And because of that, they are hell-bent on basically pleasing conservative voters in their areas. West Virginia, North Dakota went heavily for Trump, so did Indiana. So they don't want to ruffle the feathers of their conservative base before their re-election. Spineless move as always. Can you hear me? Let me know if you guys could hear me. 1, 2, 1, 2. Let me know if you could hear me. They don't want to upset the base of their constituencies, and they're basically voting to preserve their power as opposed to doing what's right for America. So, undecided on the filibuster. We have Maryland Senator Ben Cardin, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, Delaware Senator Chris Coons, Virginia Senator Mark Warner, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet. Michael Bennet is from Colorado. Neil Gorsuch is a judge in Colorado on the appeals court. Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy, which is surprising, and Maine Senator Angus King, who is an independent but caucuses with the Democrats. Before I went on, Dianne Feinstein, who is up for re-election in 2018 and should be primaried. I've done videos on her. She takes all sorts of big money from the usual suspects, has never heard of a war she doesn't like, loves things like the Patriot Act and invading your privacy for security. She actually announced that she will be voting against Neil Gorsuch. So that's a good thing. But for Bennett, Bennett's not up for re-election. So really for Bennett, it's an issue of he's from Colorado. Gorsuch has a good reputation in Colorado. That's where he is a judge. So Bennett, it's kind of, do you adhere to the Democratic Party and team up with the Democrats to filibuster, or do you go with your home state where Gorsuch has a decent reputation? I think ultimately he'll probably go with the Democratic Party. He is not up for re-election, like I said, but I don't think he wants to be out of step with the Democratic Party as they filibuster. But a lot of these people, again, are up for re-election. Ben Cardin, who's undecided, up for re-election next year. Bob Menendez, up for re-election next year. Mark Warner, up for re-election. I believe Angus King, too. So their decision-making is not only about what's right, but they already could see the ads playing against them in some conservative areas, conservative groups hitting them for playing politics, even after conservatives did the unprecedented thing of blocking Merrick Garland, who I didn't like. I didn't want Merrick Garland, but he should have got a hearing. He was qualified to at least get a hearing, but Republicans did the unprecedented act of blocking him from even getting a hearing, and now have the audacity to turn around and say, oh, these Democrats are trying to block President Trump, and unprecedented that they are trying to block Neil Gorsuch. So for me, to me, the most important thing, I mean, there's so many bad things about Neil Gorsuch, that these Democrats that are even wavering, there should be no wavering. He's extreme when it comes to female reproductive rights. In his book, He actually wrote, let me get you the quote. What will be, what will be. Oh, I lost the quote. He said something pretty radical about female reproductive rights. Oh, here it is. In his book, he wrote, "All human beings are intrinsically valuable, and the intentional taking of human life by private persons is always wrong." Let me read that one more time. All human beings are intrinsically valuable, and the intentional taking of human life by private persons is always wrong. So, translated, I'm very pro-life, and I'm going to rule that way if ever on the Supreme Court or a higher court. During his first confirmation hearing, he would not discuss his thoughts on Roe versus Wade or any of the female reproductive cases that are very, very important to progressives, Democrats, and just people who care about women controlling their bodies and not old white judges. So what he stated in his book, all human beings are intrinsically valuable and the intentional taking of human life by private persons is always wrong, sounds pretty damn pro-life to me. And that's not even to mention his rulings in the past on cases like Hobby Lobby, which allowed companies or organizations that have religious issues with providing contraception to their employees. He ruled in favor of those companies. But to me, the most troubling thing that these Democrats on the fence should be considering, Neil Gorsuch is basically a bought-off tool of the Koch brothers. And part of the reason we have such a radicalized Supreme Court in the first place is because of Citizens United, where these big money donors are basically putting their hand-picked judges on the court because they fund the politicians, the parties, and the presidents, and then the presidents appoint the people that the donors want. So I'll read you this. Neil and his wife Ann Corkery are masters of dark money, funneling millions of anonymous dollars to anti-LGBTQ and anti-choice organizations, right-wing political candidates, and state-level judicial elections. Through the Wellspring Committee, an annual fund, the Corkerys take millions of dollars from shell corporations, then turn those funds into grants to organizations like the National Organization for Marriage. A big recipient of those funds, the Judicial Crisis Network. Does Judicial Crisis Network sound familiar? It should. Funded by Wellspring and the billionaire activists Charles and David Koch, Judicial Crisis Network spent years to elect right-wing judges and attorney generals in several states. Conveniently, Neil Corkery was also the treasurer of Judicial Crisis Network and president of its allied Judicial Election Project. Judicial Crisis Network spent millions on a campaign to block the confirmation of Judge Merrick Garland, President Obama's appointee to the Supreme Court. It is now running a $10 million campaign to pressure senators to confirm Neil Gorsuch. Part of the campaign includes hiring lobbyist Bill Wichterman, who is also a founder of Wedgwood Circle, the arts organization founded by Philip Anschutz that lists Neil Corkery as its principal officer. It should come as no surprise that Gorsuch authored a concurring opinion in a case that overturned Colorado's limit on certain political donations. In Riddle v. Hickenlooper, Gorsuch's concurring opinion went beyond what was required to overturn the limits, suggesting that political spending is a, quote, fundamental right that should be subjected to strict scrutiny. This is the most rigid level of judicial review, which would hold the right to spend money on politics should be granted more protection than the act of voting in elections. The Koch brothers, Philip Anschutz, and the Davos family would be pleased. So basically, indirectly, Neil Gorsuch is getting millions and millions of dollars from these dark money groups that are part of the Koch brother network. So if you think he's going to vote in favor of the people, if you think he's going to vote in favor of workers, if you think he's going to vote in favor of labor unions, if you think he's going to vote in favor of progressives, not happening. Not happening. And I love these conservative judges who, during their confirmation hearings, love to say, politics plays no part in my judicial analysis. It's all based on the law. But then their interpretation of the law seems to very much align with conservative politics. So on one hand, Gorsuch said over and over, I go by the law, but his interpretation of the law, honestly, many judicial scholars and analysts say, is more right-wing than the late Judge Antonin Scalia. which if you're saying you could be more right wing than Antonin Scalia, folks, that's a problem. That is a problem. That's an emergency. So to me, this whole, should Democrats filibuster him? What if they deploy the nuclear option, which basically makes the filibuster mute, and you can't filibuster a Supreme Court justice? Let them do that, because the shoe's going to be on the other foot one day, and then Democrats, if we actually, when progressives actually take over the party, will be able to insert a progressive judge without the risk of filibuster. But you know what? What the Republicans did with Merrick Garland was unprecedented, undemocratic, and wrong. And they don't, and not just because fight fire with fire, but Neil Gorsuch, he's a young guy, he's 49. So he could be on the Supreme Court for 40 years. And he's extreme. He is extreme. He's almost equal to, if not more, extreme than Antonin Scalia was. So whether it's dark money, whether it's Citizens United, campaign finance, female reproductive rights, the whole gamut, he has shown through his rulings in Colorado, through his writings in his book, that he is a right-wing ideologue. And he has funding from the Koch brother network. That's why they are dropping nearly $10 million into him. So that's the deal. What you should do, don't just let Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin, and Joe Donnelly vote for him and not pay the consequences. You have Google, find Joe Manchin's number, find Heidi Heitkamp's number, find Joe Donnelly's number. Because Joe Donnelly is in Indiana that has been decimated by trade. I have covered Indiana extensively. So Joe Donnelly is going to vote for a Supreme Court justice who's going to constantly vote against the working class, who's going to constantly vote against labor unions, who's going to constantly vote against minimum wage issues. That's Joe Donnelly in Indiana. Heidi Heitkamp is from North Dakota, which is literally ground zero for destroying our planet. She's going to vote for somebody who's in the tank, Neil Gorsuch. I didn't even get into his fossil fuel ties and donations. So whether it works in this instant or not, don't let them get away with it. Keep calling, keep flooding, because they need to know it's coming. Next year, they're not going to have a free ride to re-election. And the more you call, the more pressure you put on people like Joe Manchin, people like Heidi Heitkamp, people like Joe Donnelly, the less automatic their votes for conservatives and Republicans are. Because as I always tell you, politicians are only about politicians, except Bernie. And they need to have a nice fire lit under their anus to do the right thing, as you know. So that's that. I gotta head. I'm doing an interview. I'll be on Cheddar at noon. I'll post it on my social media. So at noon, make sure you tune into Cheddar, which is a digital show. I'll be talking about Gorsuch and other things. Thanks for watching. I'll be back later.